Time for
This
questions.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, somebody's recording. That's fine. Um, so, in terms of what the kinds of things we'd like to touch on is the effects that energy efficiency and energy incentives have on sales and marketing plans. It is important to note that energy efficiency and incentives provide both opportunities and challenges within the sales context, within the sales process. So I want to touch on that. And I always like to start with a little bit of what's changed in the industry and the opportunity that provides, because our homeowners don't necessarily recognize the extent of changes that have taken place in their house and how they can take impact. So we'll talk about that. And really, this is about tuning up your technical approach to match energy efficiency programs, to think about how you're going to change both technically and from a sales process perspective to match the new reality in energy efficiency. And I am going to ask you, I'm sure you're all professionals in sales and have your own sales approach, but I'm going to ask you to refine that sales plan, and I'll talk about that more specifically, to meet the new expectations both of the industry and of homeowners. And lastly, some hints on how to integrate energy efficiency and incentives into your sales plan. So that's kind of the agenda for this morning. I think we will hold questions till the end, just from a logistical standpoint. What I will say is there are significant opportunities by incentive programs in energy efficiency. That is, when folks like BC Hydro and Fortis are out there promoting energy efficiency on your behalf, that's really excellent marketing support. It gets the phone to ring. It actually gives people new motivations. We will know, for example, that in the heating world, the HVAC world, people don't generally call until something's broken. Often in the window world, it's way too long. People wait way too long before they actually look at changing their windows. And in the insulation world, nobody really gives a thought to what's up in the attic. Now, this time of year is a good time of year. The fact that we're turning to fall, and that puts on people's minds heating and the need for heating and ventilation. But the energy work that Fortis and Clean BC and others are doing, BC Hydro are doing, also create those motivations. You also get this synergistic effect, and that's why I'm so pleased and a little bit jealous of the Home Performance Takeover Council, because when everybody's working together, when the window sales guys are talking about insulation and the HVAC folks are supporting window messages, that's really synergistic. So you get this opportunity to work with cooperating partners, and of course the association with experts. So you gain an immediate sense of trust when more than one group is talking to you about these kinds of issues. So you get that tremendous association. And lastly, there's a really nice focus on premium equipment. It's a fairly well-defined research that would say to you that energy efficient products are also in the industry, by homeowners, recognized as being higher quality. Energy Star is a great example of that. Products that are Energy Star qualified in focus groups have been shown people immediately understand or appreciate that it's energy efficient, but it's also probably higher quality. So that's a really nice synergy that you get with those incentive programs. On the flip side, there are some challenges. That is, if the motivation is simply energy efficiency as opposed to, say, a furnace breakdown, that actually in some cases creates less urgency. They want to shop around. They want to look for the very best. And so our sales plan has to recognize that. The very thing that got them to call us is also the thing that gets them to say, well, I'm going to get 2 or 3 other quotes and see what else is out there. And of course, there are additional processes associated with incentive programs that sometimes can be confusing. People are worried, when do I get my incentives, if indeed they're looking for incentives? When do I get them? What's the paperwork? So that adds a bit of process. And you are competing. I said you're cooperating with partners like window guys cooperating with insulation folks, but at the same time you're competing with those technologies. What should I do first? Should I do the insulation first? Should I do the windows? Should I do heating upgrades? So we have to be conscious of that in our sales plan. You also need to recognize with these programs, there are higher expectations. They know if they're dealing with programs that are promoted by the hydro utilities, the gas utilities, then their expectations actually go up. So you're going to have to meet those expectations, both from a sales process perspective, that is just in communicating the differences, and actual installation and delivery of whatever products you're selling. You also lastly need to recognize there are new influencers in this game. That is, the energy advisors come into play, the folks that are doing the EnerGuide ratings, and they're offering up advice to folks. So they are seeing more information from more people, and when they have more information, that often makes it difficult or more difficult for them to make decisions. So the key out of this slide is to understand there are opportunities and challenges with incentive programs. There's goods and there's bads, and we just need to adjust our sales plans accordingly to take advantage of those processes. So I am going to ask you to refine your sales plan. Anybody who's been in the sales world will know that pretty much any product sold, whether it's cars, phones, pants, houses, insulation, windows, HVAC, there's always a defined sales process. And it starts with at the front door with that good, helpful meet and greet. How are you folks today? It goes to understanding people's needs to make sure we're meeting their expectations. Then third on the list is we want to demonstrate our differences and help people understand why we are the correct contractor to choose. Fourth, they're going to have questions of us, maybe some objections. They're going to ask about price. And lastly, you're trying to help them make a decision. So this is a process that is used commonly and should be used commonly by every salesperson. But I'm going to ask you to refine that a little bit. I'm going to ask you to take each one of those elements and think about how energy and energy efficiency fits into that. I think you can all agree with me that when you first meet at the front door, you don't want to say, "Hi, I'm here to show you energy efficiency incentives." So we're not going to talk about it there. But in fact, we might change the way we ask questions. We might change the way we demonstrate the products that we're going to sell or the services that we're going to sell based on the fact that we know they've been perhaps motivated by energy incentives or at least energy efficiency. So I just wanted to start with hopefully you all have a defined sales plan. If you don't, I would really encourage you to take some definitive sales training to work out a plan. But assuming you're using a defined sales plan or process now, let's just find a way to refine that to include those energy efficiency messages. And I said I wanted to start a little bit with what's changed in the industry. And I want to give you a few things that I think your homeowners need to understand. And a classic example is when we started building houses generations ago in Canada, not necessarily lower mainland, but in other parts of Canada, but even in lower mainland, we started building basements. And those basements were never designed as living space. And I suspect some of the people on this call make a pretty good living out of turning those basements into living space. But it's not easy, is it? That is, we're asking people to live in holes in the ground. And holes in the ground are wet and cold. And we need to think about ways of ensuring that we meet people's expectations, and that obviously is in the energy efficiency world. For the HVAC folks on this call, we're trying to improve the comfort in people's houses, and yet our duct systems leak at the rate of 25 to 30%. And I know some on this call go, no, that's not me. I do a better job. But actually, surveys have been done all across North America. Properly installed, properly applied sheet metal ductwork still leaks at the rate of 25 to 30%. So therefore, if we're going to make comfort guarantees, we're going to have to respect the fact that 25 to 30% of the air that's currently going into the system never actually ends up going where you want it to go. It leaks out along the way. And then we, of course, need to understand, although most on this call will be single family folks working in single family houses, we're probably still talking more and more townhouses, more and more taller houses, and taller houses with very complicated spaces, attic spaces, and so on, do create complication with respect to comfort, with respect to where we want to start in insulation, air sealing work, and so on. And then the window folks on this call will recognize that windows provide this amazing opportunity. Windows both gain energy and lose energy. And windows on the right side of the house, the right technology, actually gain more energy than they lose over the course of a winter in the lower mainland. And that's fairly powerful when we understand that. The problem with that, of course, is it's an intermittent load. It gains a lot during the day, but then loses at night. So maintaining the comfort balance is really important for us to understand. And all I'm doing is pointing out these realities because your customers have much higher expectations, especially when you're selling under the purview of energy efficiency programs. They imagine that if you're selling something energy efficient, that your comfort levels are going to go up. And I just want you to be conscious of making sure we're setting realistic expectations for our clients. Fifth on the list there, you'll notice, and I think you all recognize this, that as much as we'd like to think that insulation of an attic or installation of windows or a better furnace is going to improve energy efficiency, still in today's world, certainly older houses, at least 30 to 50% of winter heating bills are associated with air leakage. And unless you're addressing air leakage, you're really discounting the amount of energy that folks can save. So everybody on this call has to be committed to every project you work on, try to improve the air tightness of buildings. Certainly attic insulation. Before we add that insulation, let's make sure we're air sealing. If we're installing windows, let's do a full frame tear out to make sure that we're air sealing around that rough stud opening. Furnace installers, let's make sure we're decommissioning old chimneys when we put in high efficiency. And when we put in those high efficiency vents, let's make sure we're air sealing correctly around them. The last item on this page is probably the most important. That is, the expectations of consumers have changed. I'm old enough to remember that around this time of year, September in Ontario, the Eaton's truck would pull up and there would be, for my family, there would be corduroy pants and flannel shirts. We knew that in the wintertime we were to wear sweaters and slippers. And now you'll find customers because they're spending so much money on houses, especially in your market, their expectations are if I spent $500,000 or $1 million on a house, my expectations are that the temperature would be the same on the bottom floor and on the top floor. And if you look at the picture on this screen of that townhouse, that 1,500 square foot townhouse, vertical townhouse, you can imagine the challenges of trying to maintain. Anybody on this call will be able to understand the challenges to maintain a 1 degree temperature difference between upstairs and downstairs, just knowing what we know about heat flow, warm air rising, and so on. And even the last little phrase on this slide, the 3% difference with relative humidity. I often chide the Honeywell folks and give them a hard time for putting these numbers on our humidistat that used to be more or less on a control, and now they're telling people it's 32% or 42% relative humidity. And we know that relative humidity is a huge function of comfort, and maintaining moisture in houses can be a real challenge, especially in your climate zone throughout the winter, to maintain that healthy relative humidity level. And again, I don't mean to overplay this. I just want us to be conscious of, and you've all taken training as part of that Home Performance Council. You've had access to a lot of training that would say the challenges in houses are great, and they're getting tougher and tougher given the realities of both the changes in houses and the expectations of consumers. And so I would say we need to respect the changes. And as an example of that, under the federal government programs that were run in the early years, this would have been, I guess they were finished in the Harper era, but the EnerGuide rating system, what was called Eco Energy, over 1 million houses in Canada were rated. I don't know if you remember that. Under that program, people were given incentives to have an energy rating on their house. You guys had a fantastic challenge program out in BC, and it created a lot of interest. People had ratings done in their houses, then tried to improve their houses, and that increased the overall knowledge of people and increased their expectations of the kinds of things that it could have gotten done. It also helps people understand that whether their house was indeed energy efficient enough, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Of course, in the meantime, codes have changed significantly. You guys probably have an appreciation for this. Houses built in BC in the year 2000, that is under your 2000 building code, use twice as much energy as a new house built today in the Lower Mainland or in BC in general. That is Our codes have changed so much that houses use half the amount of energy that they did even as recently as 15 to 20 years ago. At the same time, we put in more windows, bigger and better windows. And I don't think we're going back to fewer windows anytime soon. Those windows can be both good and bad from an energy perspective. We have to remind ourselves that windows are an intermittent load. They have advantages, but they also have challenges in cold weather. Of course, furnaces have gotten much better now that we're all putting in high efficiency direct vent. Many of you would be doing heat pumps. Great choice in the lower mainland, much better equipment. And of course, there's an increased interest in air conditioning. You guys haven't traditionally been a market that's air conditioning, but I need you to link item number 3 on the screen with item number 5. That is because of the intermittent nature of loads of windows facing south, east, or west in the summer are creating huge overheating of houses. In fact, 60% of air conditioning loads in Vancouver are associated with windows. If you're putting in more and bigger windows, you're going to see more and more interest in air conditioning, not because of climate change outside, but because of climate change inside that performance of windows. So important to understand those changes. And of course, we're doing more and more multifamily. You guys are going to see more and more of that. Houses are taller and thinner. We have more glass, more plumbing, more lights, more appliances. It's changed the nature of energy use in houses. And I just want us to be conscious of that in our training and our education of homeowners to help them understand that houses have changed. The house that they grew up in is not necessarily the way the house that they're living in now is going to work. And we need to manage the expectations of those clients. And of course, this does impact, as I say, the expectations of homeowners. The airtightness of buildings, for example, with more windows, the amount of ventilation that we need. People often blame ventilation, the need for ventilation, on the fact that we've made houses tighter. And it turns out that's not actually true. The reason we have the need for ventilation in houses is because people stopped ventilating their houses. And you may know, I think you'll all know, the reason I can say that is because somewhere along the line we stopped opening windows. Even in your idyllic lower mainland climate there, and in many parts of British Columbia, if you said to somebody, yeah, just leave your windows open 24 hours a day, they would say no. Noise, dust, security issues. So it turns out all houses need mechanical ventilation, not because we've made them tighter, but because we've stopped opening windows. So keep that in mind as a sales opportunity and as a way to understand the expectations of homeowners, the fact that they don't really link that. They don't really recognize that it was their change of habit, not the change in the house, but their change of habit with respect to windows that makes this more difficult. And as I've mentioned, you're going to see more and more interest in air conditioning. Why? Because of more and more windows. That changes the heating cooling mix in houses. And lastly, the sensible latent mix. You guys have always had a humid climate, but it's getting even more difficult. Why? Because you have reduced the sensible load, that is the heat load through windows, through walls, but you've increased latent loads because of more lights, more appliances, mainly more plumbing in houses. So respect those changes is what I'm asking you to do. And the comfort expectations are much higher than they used to be in terms of moisture control and temperature variance. If I was there with you, I'd be asking you right now, what are our customers' expectations with respect to temperature variances between areas of their house? And I think all of you would be agreeing right now it's 1 to 2 degrees at most. And what are their expectations for quiet or noise control, indoor air quality? What are their expectations? And what are their expectations with respect to service? If we said to them, we'll be back to you within 48 hours if your furnace craps out, they're going to say, well, that's not good enough. I need you here now. And of course, lastly, the knowledge expectations are higher. I say that because very much because of the work that's being done by Fortis and BC Hydro and others, is there's lots and lots of awareness about energy efficiency and climate change. So their expectations are higher for your knowledge levels. They expect you to be the experts, and we need to be able to respond to that. And so I just wanted to, just one little piece, I guess. I mentioned windows as a comfort challenge, and here's why. We think about it, we sense the temperature in our buildings with a thermostat that measures air temperature. but our bodies sense temperature differently. Our bodies respond, or at least our sense of comfort is partly related to perspiration and humidity levels. That's about 15% of our sense of comfort. About 35% of our sense of comfort is indeed associated with that air temperature that surrounds us. But as much as 50% of our sense of comfort is associated with the radiation of the surfaces that surround us. So in this picture, all this glass, wonderful, great view, but indeed now people sitting in that room are no longer responding to air temperatures. They're responding to the surface temperatures of the glass. And if it's hot, sunny day, sun streaming in, the glass is warm, people are going to ask you, why does it feel so warm in here? You're going to go to the thermostat and it's going to say 21 degrees or 23 degrees, and you're going to go, well, the thermostat says it's fine. They're actually not responding to the air temperature. They're responding to the surface temperatures. And that's why the challenge, the opportunities, I guess I should say, with windows, picking the proper glass that's managing not only heat loss, heat gain, but the surface temperatures of that glass. So window folks on this call, start understanding and helping your clients understand the value of the proper low emissivity coatings, the choices that you now have to optimize not only the energy performance, but the comfort performance of those windows. So just wanted to give you a little sense. That's a fairly long conversation about the changes that have taken place in our buyers. But I'll give you a practical example of that. You think about this basement. This is a, basement that was done in the 70s. You can all see this now. And you can also start to imagine, can everybody smell that basement right now? Can you smell the must and the mold, the moisture, the dampness in that basement? And if we're going to be offering more energy efficient basements, let's think about, can we do better than this? And if I asked you to describe to mention 4 words that describe the atmosphere in that basement, you'll all agree that's cold, damp, dark, and musty. And if you offer up a basement renovation, an energy efficient basement renovation, they're going to want that basement to end up being warm, dry, bright, and healthy. And so how do we do that? And understanding the science of how basements work. So we have to think about that. And that leads us to, and those on this call probably represent all of the elements on this screen. The energy advisors, the airtightness, the HVAC contractors, window contractors, insulation contractors, plumbing, appliance, lighting, air conditioning folks. Whose priority? What are the priorities? What should I be doing first? What should I be doing second? How can we all work together to make sure that homeowners are getting what they need? And what you need to understand is it's no longer Owens Corning versus Knauf, or Lennox versus Carrier, and Geldwin versus Plygem versus Anderson. It's now understanding the total of all of this. Helping clients make the right decisions in the right order is what we want to help them with. And I am going to say to you, the good news, you are with a group, the Stakeholder Council, that embraces the building science, understanding the air, heat, and moisture flow in buildings. The good news is Canada has done more work than anybody else in North America, certainly, but even around the world. Our building science is second to none. We've been doing this for a long time. I just happened to meet recently the inventor of the blower door from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Harold Orr, who is recognized through the Order of Canada as being a contributor to the overall efficiency of houses, not only in Canada, but throughout the world, for his work on air leakage and its impact on the way buildings work. So embrace that science. Always use the science with your clients. And as I said, when you think about that basement challenge, the moisture sources, the soil dampness, the rainwater, the construction, water vapor, condensation-related cold basements, how do we manage that in terms of making sure that we're helping customers make good decisions? So finding the right solutions to address moisture issues, choosing appropriate insulation types, making assemblies airtight, providing proper ventilation and dehumidification. And what I'm getting at here is we have a new reality, new expectations. If you're going to go in and sell an energy efficient project such as a basement renovation, let's make sure we're embracing the science, understanding that we have to solve the moisture issues first before we can add insulation. So that was a fairly long preamble, and when we think about how we're going to make those kinds of decisions, another example of that is the windows, making sure that when we choose the proper windows, helping our customers understand the opportunities and the challenges of the choices that they make, finding those right elements, finding the right combinations of glazings that help them make that good decision. And so finding in this case, the windows, you'll notice on the left-hand side, the window folks will recognize this. Those who aren't window folks maybe have a clue onto this one. But if you look on the screen, on the left-hand side, it says solar heat gain coefficient of 0.19. That's a piece of glass that's only letting in 19% of the heat from outside. And you go, is that a good thing in Canada? Don't we want heat coming into our houses through our glass to actually, warm up the house? But in fact, maybe not. On the right-hand side, you'll see one that's letting in 61% of the heat. And if you have a whole bunch of glass facing west, and you're letting in 61% of that winter sun, you're also letting in 61% of the summer sun. So you just went from solving perhaps a winter energy issue, that is gaining some free heat from the sun, but in the summertime causing overheating. So we're going to have to be responsible. And the window guys and the window folks are going to have to talk to the HVAC folks, because if you're going to put in a piece of glass at 61% heat gain, then probably there's going to have to be a conversation about needing air conditioning in that house for at least some of the summer. So helping with that conversation is where we want to get to. So I just showed you those. I should have circled those earlier, but that conversation that we have. And here's where we get into the crux of the conversation for today. Where does energy efficiency fit in? I always like to show a picture of my grandson. Now that's him on the right-hand side, Oliver. But I want to focus really on my son and my daughter-in-law when they're making decisions in their houses. Logically, if you ask them, and if you ask folks in general, 59% of people say that they are interested in the dollar savings that would be associated with energy efficiency. They all claim they're interested in energy efficiency of the savings associated with energy efficiency. But unfortunately, in a sales conversation, they're seldom motivated to do so. And I suspect everybody on this call will be able to recognize. We talk about energy efficiency, homeowners say they're interested in energy efficiency, and then ultimately they seem to make decisions that aren't energy efficient. And we wonder why that is. Well, here's why. First and foremost, they already think their house is energy efficient. Remember I said over 1 million people had their houses rated in Canada? They all think now their house is energy efficient. They think somebody came in, even if they didn't do anything, they still claim that my house must be energy efficient because I had an energy advisor come and he told me what I should do. Did you do any of those items? Well, we only did the light bulbs, but they still think their house is energy efficient. In fact, when surveyed, people think that any house built after 1990 is as efficient as it can possibly get. Isn't that amazing? Think of all the houses built since 1990, all of the improvements we've made even in the last 5 or 10 years, and yet they think that house is already efficient. Second, they don't believe the energy claims. Unfortunately, they've heard it all before. Change your light bulbs, you'll save 30%. Change your furnace, you'll save 30%. Put insulation in the attic, you'll save 30%. And they don't actually see it on their bill. The reason they don't see it on their bill is because they actually don't know what their bill is. If you ask most clients, I want you to do this next time you're at the kitchen table walking through a presentation with your homeowners, I want you to ask this key question, sitting in front of that couple. Can you tell me what your energy bill is within $100 for this coming year, both gas and electric together? And you'll find that more than half of them turn to their partner and say, I don't know, what are we spending? In other words, most people don't even know what they're spending on their energy bill. I'd ask you that question. Do you know your bill in your household? So one, they already think their house is efficient. Two, they frankly don't believe the claims, mainly because they don't really know what you're talking about. They don't really have a sense. And when you say to them, you're going to save 30%, they're thinking 30% of what? I don't know what my bill is now. Or they get confused between their gas bill and their electrical bill. I'll give you the example. Not this son, but another one of my sons. We insulated the attic of his house, and immediately when we finished, he said, oh, this was in the middle of the summer. He said, oh, this is going to be great. I can hardly wait to see my electric bill go down. And I said to him, Brian, this isn't going to have much impact on your electrical bill. That's electrical bill is lights and appliances. He didn't even have air conditioning at the time. This is going to, in fact, impact your heating bill. He said, I don't even know what my heating bill is. His gas bill was so low, hadn't even entered into his consciousness. So just be careful when you think about energy efficiency that they don't really know what you're talking about. And here's the most important, the last one on the list. The reason they're really calling you is because they're busy buying things that improve their lives. The reason they want new windows in their houses, for the most part, is not to save energy. They assume it's going to save energy, but it's not to save energy. It's maybe to improve the look of the house, the aesthetics, the maintenance of the house, to get rid of that maintenance. They are spending time and money on things that they think will improve their lives. And the good news is we can help with that. Everything that we do for energy efficiency also helps improve their lives, but we need to recognize their prime motivation in a sales conversation is not energy efficiency. Can I say that again? When they're out filling out a survey, when they're listening to advertisements from Fortis or from BC Hydro, BC Power, they're thinking about energy savings. But when you get to the house, it's now an emotional decision, and they're thinking about how will this improve my life as opposed to energy savings. And not that we're going to give up on energy, but understanding that it's not their major priority. So remember those changes. They already had their house rated, perhaps. They think their house is already energy efficient. They've changed the furnace, perhaps, in the windows. They've probably changed some light bulbs. They've bought some new appliances, and they don't even know what they're spending on energy now. But they already think when you say save 30% or 20%, whatever the number you give them, they're really not tied into that. They're not cluing in. They don't necessarily believe you. So that's our challenge when we're doing this is, and a little example of that, there's a great group. If you get a chance, download, go to the Shelton Group.com, and Suzanne does a bunch of surveying of energy efficiency objectives and perceptions, mainly of Americans, but most of it rings true for Canada as well. One of the surveys she did, she started asking about some of the terms that we use. Everybody on this call will know what a VOC is, and we'd all want low VOCs. So she actually tested that amongst homeowners, and here was the problem. Very few of them knew which products emitted VOCs. 21% said they understood the term, they didn't really know what it meant, but only 54% found this term undesirable. 54% found this term undesirable. In other words, they thought they wanted high VOCs. They didn't want low, they wanted high. The point is they're confused. They don't know the words we're using. We throw words out all the time. AFUE or low E glass or solar heat gain coefficients. They don't really, even R values, they don't really understand what those terms mean. Here was a more interesting one. You guys know in Vancouver specifically, you guys are going to be at net zero houses by the year 2030, probably at the latest. When surveyed, the term net zero, 30% didn't expect energy savings and didn't know there were other benefits of the word net zero. Only 30% said they understood the term. And here was the most fascinating part. 24% thought this was a good thing, desirable, but a full 43% thought it was undesirable. They actually said they wanted high energy houses, not zero energy houses. So they were confused. The point out of this is they're confused. They don't really know what you're talking about. So here's the point. They have access to a lot of information, yet they often don't know what they're spending now. And the problem is they don't know who to trust. Everybody okay with that? They have access to a lot of information. They don't know what they're spending, and it comes down to this. They want to trust you. So the good news is we need a sales process that builds trust. The bad news is, or the challenge is, are you ready to do that? Are you ready to refine your sales plan that talks less about energy efficiency and more about building trust with clients? So I want to match the changing motivations of my clients. I want to help them meet new expectations, and I want to optimize the incentives opportunity. But most importantly, I want a sales plan that builds trust. And I want to spend a few minutes on that, remind you of that sales plan, that helpful meet and greet, understanding needs, demonstrating differences, addressing their concerns, and helping them make a decision. That's what our goal is. That's what we're going to attempt to do. But it starts with building trust. And I'm going to show you here, this is just good old sound sales training. Read any sales book and it'll tell you that there's 3 ways to build trust. The first is to ask genuine questions. Well, most salespeople start with, believe me, trust me. They like to talk about how long they've been in the industry, how the reputation of the company. But frankly, it doesn't work. The more you say to somebody, believe me, trust me, they actually don't. So the best way to build trust is to ask genuine questions. I'll show you a little bit more on that in a second. Second is to associate yourself with trusted brands or partners. That is, rather than asking people to trust you, associate yourself with brands that are already trusted by homeowners that we can use. And interestingly enough, the utilities have an innate trust. So by all means, use the fact that you're working under the auspices of utility programs because that builds trust. And the third one on the list is what's called show proof, to actually demonstrate. And I'm going to touch on each of these over the next few minutes as we walk through the balance of this presentation. So the first thing I said to you was to ask genuine questions. Here's why. Well, the obvious one is it finds out what people need and want. That's pretty obvious. Now, I don't want to be asking them difficult questions. I want to ask them, what's the BTUs on your furnace now? Don't want to be asking, what's the R value in your attic now? Those are too difficult to answer, and they don't really get what we want. What we're really trying to do is build trust. And let me help you understand why that's true. As I said, you can't ask somebody to trust you because they don't. It turns out the first element of trust, before somebody can trust you, they have to first like you. That's pretty interesting. I just got to get people to like me. How do I get people to like me? The best way to get somebody to like you is for you to like them first. Let me make that connection. If you like them, they're predisposed to like you. And if they're predisposed to like you, they're predisposed to trust you. So the value of your questions is simply to show you're interested in them. Now, a question that's not of interest to them is, what's the R value in your attic now? But a question that is of interest to them would be, oh, tell me about your house. There's some very, very simple questions that you can ask that encourages them to talk about themselves, about their house, about their family, that actually simultaneously helps you find out their needs, but also more importantly, helps them like you and therefore trust you. And of course, incentive programs help because they allow us to ask different types of questions because we can ask, and I'll show you the few important phrases. You're going to get a copy of this presentation, at least I'm assuming it's available to you, but here's the phrases that you want to start with. What's prompted your search for new windows, for insulation, for basement renovation? The good news is they're going to be able to help you. In this case, in the past, they only called you when the furnace broke down. Now they may be saying, well, I saw on the web or I heard an ad for energy incentives and it sounded like a good thing that would help my house. It's a great question to start with. Second, what are your plans for the house? Not just, the reason I want you to ask this is because they're calling you and they're calling other contractors as well from maybe other areas of the house. So make sure we're asking about their plans for the house. What is the long-term plan? Tell me about your house. Tell me about your family. Hear that phrase? Tell me about, tell me about, tell me about. It's encouraging them to talk about themselves, about their family. You're going to find out really interesting things about what's really motivating. Remember, we want to know things that would improve their lives. And if you said, tell me about your family, and you found out that they had a gifted drummer, somebody who's a musician, boy, that basement renovation becomes very important because now I want a soundproof basement. And you'd be able to sell more and more insulation that makes it not only more energy efficient, but also makes it soundproof. And so you've now found the real motivation, not energy efficiency, but the fact that I can use this valuable information to help improve their lives. So the value of great questions is it builds trust. Think though, and here's an exercise for you. Review the next time you're at a house, who did most of the talking? If you did most of the talking, you didn't do enough listening. Adjust your questions so that it encourages people to talk more. Let me say that again. Your questions should all be judged on how much people talk after you say them. An example, how many kids do you have? 3. What are their ages? 6, 12, 19. That's 2 questions that got you very short answers, as opposed to, tell me a little bit about your family. Well, we have 3 kids, 6, 12, 19. One of them is a gifted drummer. The other one has little asthma and allergy problems. By asking the question, tell me about, rather than how many, just try to be more open-ended. You all know that intuitively. Open-ended questions is what you want to get to. Our second element of trust is to associate yourself with trusted partners. No better way, no better reason to talk about energy efficiency is that you are intuitively adding to this idea that everybody's working together. This is the biggest value of energy efficiency programs and energy efficiency overall, is that you get to associate yourself with others. It's kind of a cool idea that Fortis and BC Hydro are trying to help people use less of their product. Isn't that interesting? And because of that, there's trust. Why would Fortis, why would BC Hydro be interested in people using less electricity, less gas, unless it was a win-win opportunity for everybody? And the minute you explain that it's actually good for those companies and it's good for the homeowners and it's good for you, this really builds trust. So think about which brands have recognition and value and who else can you associate yourself with. I'm assuming you all in this world now have an association or at least know a certified energy evaluator. There's some great folks in BC that are out giving advice and are useful in these programs to help identify energy efficiency opportunities. So all of you need to have an association with an energy advisor, certified energy advisor. If you don't have an association with one, go to the websites, the Natural Resources Canada website, put in your postal code, and it'll give you names of certified energy evaluators that you want to go have a coffee with, and just make sure that you're using the same messages as they are. The third element on the list is that idea of proof, that don't just go in and talk about things, but actually measure. More importantly, actually help them measure. Point out if you're this particular slide is associated for the most part with furnace equipment. Well, not necessarily. We're doing the air tightness test here in the middle, but on the side we're doing on the left hand side you'll see he's measuring temperatures and pressures in the duct system. Infrared cameras now are available to everybody. That little item in the very middle top of the screen, I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but that actually measures the solar heat gain coefficient of windows. So you can go in and show them the windows they have now and what percentage of the sun they're allowing in, where that may lead to air conditioning. The item on the right is called a black globe thermometer. It measures simultaneously air temperature, humidity, and the average surface temperatures surrounding them. Remember we talked about thermal comfort and the three things that impact thermal comfort? Air temperature, humidity, and surface temperatures. This device, it's called a black globe thermometer, measures all three. And wouldn't that be interesting if you could go into somebody's house and say, oh, I can see now why you're uncomfortable in this room. And does that mean I need different windows? The window guys need this one. The HVAC contractors need this one to be able to help understand these items. And so I'm going to say to you, just bringing out the tools immediately builds trust. We all know some of the most trusted people in the world are the people we deal with, our doctors, partly because they do tests. So find something that you can test and show people how things actually work. And the good news is when we finally get to energy efficiency, the same things that make houses more energy efficient also make them more durable, healthier, quieter, controllable, and comfortable. And this means there's dozens of valuable consumer benefits that we can sell. It's going to be so powerful. And so what I am going to say to you is, here's homework for you. You need to know better than anyone else the features of your products, what it is, the facts. Secondly, what it does, how it works, insulation. If you double the amount of insulation, you cut the heat flow in half. That's just physics. But most importantly on this slide, how does it improve their lives? What does that insulation do for you? When I cut the heat flow in half through a wall, through a ceiling, through a floor in the basement, how does that actually improve their lives other than energy savings? And as you're doing this, think about a simple example, ventilation. It's an HRV, heat recovery ventilator. Great term. Its advantage is it has two quiet fans that exchange stale air for outside air. Great, that's its nice advantage. And it has a heat exchanger that recovers 70% of the energy between the two airstreams. But what are the actual benefits? What does it do for you? Is that 70% enough? What is it really doing? And what we've learned is people don't know what an HRV is, but they sure know what fresh air is. Fresh filtered air. In fact, I'm going to challenge you. Never ever call it an HRV ever again. I've learned this. I used to sell these, used to make these, and I sold them. Now I'd say I tried never to use that term again in front of a homeowner. They don't know what it is. But what I say to them is it's a whole house fresh air system. And they all get it. They immediately nod their head and go, oh, of course, that's what I want in my house. It means that odors don't linger. That's a tremendous benefit. People hate coming home and smelling what they had for breakfast in the house. And it's things like no icky black stuff on the windowsills. Wouldn't that be nice to know that I don't have any of that mold anymore? And so when you're doing this exercise, a feature, advantage, benefit, I want you to know this. You guys know this. All of you will know this. There's two sides of the brain. There's the logical left side of the brain, and there's the emotional right. What you need to remind yourself is what side of the brain makes every decision, specifically every decision in their house. And it, in fact, is the emotional right-hand side of the brain. The emotional side of the brain makes all the decisions. The logical side of the brain is the one that's interested in energy savings, but it actually doesn't make the decisions. It's the one when you fill out a survey. No surprise when they fill out a survey and say they're interested in energy efficiency, or they see an ad about energy efficiency, they make a phone call. That's the logical left side of the brain. But when you get to the house, when you're at the kitchen table, it's all emotion. And what they're interested in is the no sweaty nights, the breathing easier, the cozy family rooms, even something as simple as the furnace is going to be quiet enough so I don't have to turn up the TV when the furnace is on. Or how about that safe basement playroom? Imagine all of the features that you have. Try to find emotional benefits out of those features. And so, as I said, in the marketing world, we're allowed to use words like quiet, comfortable, and safe. But in the sales world, we need to change up our conversation and use life improving benefits like I can sleep in on a Saturday morning or a truly livable basement, worry free holidays. I'm going to say it this way. The next time you're in your house and you find yourself saying to somebody, it'll make your house quieter, remember this webinar and immediately go. And what that means to you is you can sleep in on Saturday mornings or your neighbors won't hear your kid drumming in the basement. The words quiet, comfortable, safe, durable, and efficient are marketing words. They are not sales words. You need to add to your conversation. Take those words, and when you're in a sales conversation, make sure you add what this means to you is. It's the most important slide, frankly, on this entire webinar. And so it's a marketing and sales challenge. They say they want energy efficiency, but that's not the prime motivator. It turns out people buy an emotion and then justify on the facts. Here's, in fact, the way the brain works. The emotional side of the brain says, I want that because I can sleep in Saturday mornings or they won't hear my kid drumming. And then it says to the logical side of the brain, give me 3 to 4 reasons why it's okay to buy this. That's the way the brain actually works in these kinds of decisions. And so they use the energy savings as a justification. It's not the prime motivator. Still need to talk about it. So you start to understand as I'm doing this webinar, as I'm finishing up here, that you're going to use energy savings, but not until the end. You're going to use it and understand that emotion is always, always first. Imagine that insulation, those better windows, and what it does to that night's sleep, that restful, cozy night's sleep. It's always, always emotion. So logically, that's an HRV, but emotionally, it's an automatic window, it's a fresh air machine, it's fresh filtered air, it's the healthiest possible air for your family, or it's the original Febreze. Think about the emotional benefits of all your products. It's an exercise for you to do, is to think about every one of your products and how it could improve their lives. So thinking about those emotional needs, and you can imagine these two families need this tankless water heater for different reasons. The same features may have different benefits to different people. In the case on the left-hand side, this little buddy needs to know that little buddy isn't going to scald his fingers when he turns on the tap. But the people on the right-hand side, that seniors couple, they're going to say, well, I don't have to worry about it when I go away for vacation down to Phoenix. So I always match up the emotional needs with with the benefits of the products you have. And as another little example of that, if you ask somebody whether they want their house tightly sealed, I don't want my house tightly sealed. I want fresh air. But if you said to them, exactly how many holes would you like in your walls or attics? Well, I don't want any holes in my walls or attics. Bugs would come in, noise would come in, dust would come in. Exactly. So we want our building enclosures to be tight, but we want fresh air in our home all the time. And we can do both of those off the same things. So what about, as we finish up, just 3-4 minutes left, I realize I talked too much, but we'll see how we make out. What about the money question? Why do they ask that money question? And it turns out here's the main reason why they ask. They don't know what else to ask. I know that sounds oversimplified, but 60% of the time, the reason they ask the money question is because they don't know what else to ask. It's the logical side of the brain trying to enter into the conversation. Remember, the emotional side of the brain bought it, and then the logical side of the brain has to justify it. And when the logical side of the brain goes to justify it, immediately goes, I'll ask about the price. So remind yourself, money comes at the end. I want you to say this with me. When they ask about the price, the savings, the incentives, I always say, good question. I've got some great information to share, but first, let's find the right equipment for your family. In other words, start with the emotion, get it sold emotionally, then come back to the price. And when you do talk about the price, demonstrate the value first, have them understand how it's going to improve their lives, but then break down that price. Focus on the investment quality. Apply the incentives one at a time. If there's more than one incentive, more than one rebate, don't lump them together. Remember, the logical side of the brain needs to hear 3 to 4 facts. And if you meter out the incentives one at a time, oh, by the way, there's an incentive from BC Hydro, and then add the Fortis incentive, and then add the rebate that the manufacturer is offering, perhaps, and then add the energy savings. Now the logical side of the brain is breaking down in their mind how they can justify making this decision. The emotion bought it. The logical side needs 3 to 4 reasons why it's okay to buy it. And therefore, that's the value of that incentive plan and the energy efficiency program. It gives you tremendous marketing support. It gets the phone to ring. It gives you new motivations because it encourages new questions. It allows you to associate with trusted partners, and it gives you 2 or 3 logical reasons to make emotional decisions. So as we finish up, understand this, it's our time. The changes in expectations provide these great opportunities. Ask more questions. Climate change, energy efficiency, it's never been on people's minds more than now. It's a great time for us. But value the partnerships. That's why I love the council here, that you guys are all working together. Use that in your sales approach. Focus on those emotional benefits, and then use incentive programs throughout the sales plan to ask better questions and ultimately to help the logical side of the brain say, yes, this is good for my family. And I'll say thank you for investing your time. We may have a minute or so. Christine, would we have a minute for questions or so?
Yes, we do. If anybody has any questions, you can submit them through the chat function. We do have one question from Ryan. If infiltration impacts heating loads by 30 to 40%, how do we increase consumer awareness and value of air sealing, since this trade practice is not widely adopted by contractors, including insulators?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I said, Harold Orr invented the blower door in 1973, and we've been struggling ever since to get people to understand. The best way, frankly, is to sell the concept of a blower door test on people's houses. It's so demonstrative, and so all of you on this call should be supporting the idea. Window installers or window contractors, HVAC contractors should say to folks, have you had an energy rating done on your house? Let me help you with that. Maybe I'll build it into my pricing. Let's find all of the unwanted air leaks in your house and make sure you're doing it that way. Don't tell them that you're going to seal the house. It's not a good phrase. I'm going to get rid of the noise, the dust, and the bugs that are coming through the unwanted holes in your house. So I think that's the best way. It's not that expensive. Blower door tests aren't that expensive. So I think that's the way, but everybody on this call has to commit to that. You all need to understand the benefits of that. So thanks, Ryan, for that important question.
Just a reminder, you can submit questions over the chat function, but I'm not seeing any coming up. So I just wanted to thank you, Gord. I think that was a great presentation, a really great overview. Certainly lots to think about and to put into practice. probably get some questions after the fact. So here comes one. Talking to an energy advisor, he was saying not only builders but owners do not understand F280.
Yeah, it's fair enough. And there's a great F280 is the heat loss heat gain standard. And here's the point: homeowners can never be expected, builders can never be expected to understand. They don't know what a VOC is. They don't know what net zero is. They don't know what HRVs are. They don't know what F280 is. Here's what they do know. Would you like the right amount of heat to every room in your house so that you can use every room in your house? This is where we take the feature. We're doing a heat loss, a certified heat loss, heat gain. We take measurements of your entire house. There's the demonstration. There's the proof. Measure every window. Measure the house. That's your proof that this is important. And then we make sure that this room that you're not able to use right now because there's not enough heat getting to it, or your son is in 3 blankets and 2 sleeping bags because it's so cold up here, that's why we're doing it. F280 is the feature. The advantage is I'm measuring every room in the house specific to your needs. The benefit is here's how it'll improve your life. Your kids will sleep in the morning. You won't wake up in a cold sweat, so on and so on. So I would say don't ever expect people to know what F280 is. Don't even try to educate them. Understand how it could improve their lives. They will recognize there was this number they gave me, F280. I don't know what it meant, but he measured every room in the house. He measured every window exactly for our house. And then they sized the equipment according to that. This has to be more trustworthy because they actually took out a tape measure, and I actually helped them do the measurements. In fact, do it that way. Have them help you do the measurements or fill in the sheet. The fact that their body's helping you helps build trust. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. So just once again, thanks, Gord. I want to respect everybody's time, so we'll wrap up here. If you do have questions, feel free to submit them to info@homeperformance.ca, and we'll get those answered for you. Hope we can hear more from you in the future, Gord. Lots of good experience to share with us. So thank you once again.
And I'd love to be with you guys. Thank you very much for investing the time. I know it's always tough on a webinar, but I appreciate the opportunity to help, hopefully just a little bit. And good luck with your programs. You guys are doing an awesome job out there. We really, as I say, we're a little bit jealous of you out there because you're doing such a great job. So thank you for that.
Thank you. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.